Good evening, and thank you for joining Healthy Heart Nation's Rittenhouse verdict discussion tonight. Demonstrations sprang up nationwide in protest of Kyle Rittenhouse's verdict on Friday night after Wisconsin jury found the 18-year-old not guilty for killing two men and wounding of another during a political unrest in Kenosha last summer. The verdict sparked outrage among those who feared an acquittal would embolden vigilantism and anger in the families of the men shot who were seeking accountability and justice. Others, including pro-gun conservatives, have hailed Rittenhouse as a hero who was protecting private property from rioters. This evening, Healthy Heart Nation would like to have a discussion around the Rittenhouse verdict and how it impacts the Black community. And tonight we're going to be joined by Jeff Redcross, Esquire, Joe McKenzie, Esquire, and Devonna Roseberry, Esquire, who will help me co-moderate tonight. So thank you guys for joining and welcome to our discussion tonight.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I just concluded a 26-year law enforcement career. While I was finishing up, I went to law school, graduated, passed the bar. So getting ready to get into practice and do that, which is my passion, and that's law, because, you know, it's a natural progression, 26 years of law enforcement, to move on and take your game to the next level. So that's exactly what I try to do here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. And Joe McKenzie?
Hi. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to be invited to this forum. I've been practicing since 2005, 16 years. I enjoy being a criminal defense attorney. That's my main focus. I do other areas of law, but criminal defense attorney is an area where I can act as a social worker and an advocate inside the courtroom. And I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Thank you, Joe. And Devonna?
Good evening. My name is Devonna Roseberry, and I have been practicing law for, I believe, 18 years now, 18, 19 years, mainly in the areas of family law. I also represent juveniles in the areas of delinquency, as well as juveniles and parents who are involved in the foster care system. So that's mainly my background. The only time I touch the criminal side is with the juveniles.
Okay, and thank you. Thank you guys for being here. And you guys are all ambassadors with Healthy Heart Nation on our justice team. So again, we do appreciate you for being a part of this and for joining this discussion. So we're going to have the format to just be really just talking. So you don't have to necessarily be, wait for the other person to finish. If you need to get something in there, let's get in there. Let's talk like we're around the dinner table, and let's have this discussion about the Rittenhouse verdict and what that means to the Black community in terms of how it was handled and some of the issues around that. So, in discussions earlier, one of the things that we had discussed was just the relationship that appeared with Rittenhouse and the judge. And so, Joe, I'm going to let you open up a little bit about your feedback around the relationship that the defendant had with the judge and how you think that impacted the verdict.
Yes. Okay. So the first thing that raised my eyebrows about the irregularity of this particular courtroom was when I heard the judge say, "You may not refer to the deceased as a victim." Attorney Redcross, I'm sure you're familiar with this, and Ms. Roseberry, being part of the judicial system, when you are in court and when it is in the context of a murder or a rape, the person who's on the receiving end of the rape, or which is a live victim, or the deceased who is a dead victim, there's a certain level of reverence and deference that you give to that person. There's a hollowed treatment when you refer to them. And for the judge to start off by saying, you can't call the person that is deceased a victim, a person that a person's death, which was indicted, which probably went before a grand jury, and a grand jury, people from the citizenry said, this person, we believe there's enough probable cause to establish that this person was murdered.
Right.
They're a victim. So that raised an eyebrow. So then when we enter the courtroom, the bizarre behavior of this judge is something like I've never seen before. For him to scold the prosecutor, talk to them like they weren't professionals and like they were children was unbelievable. The way he spoke towards and likened himself and befriended himself with the defendant who's on trial for murder. He's not on trial for trespassing. He's not on, this is not a civil case. This person is deemed to be the most dangerous person in our judicial system. And I have never been in court where somebody who's on trial for murder gets to just have free access all over the courtroom, gets to go behind the bench and stand with the judge as if they're father and son and look at cell phone pictures. That is highly irregular. And it basically sent a message to the jurors, because jurors, most of them don't know anything about the judicial system except what they see on Law and Order.
Right.
So when you walk in there, same thing if somebody's walking into church for the first time, you look at the pastor and the pastor direction as to what the environment is. When you walk into a court, the judge has supreme knowledge. He's likened as the person has supreme knowledge, supreme authority. So his energy is adapted by these civilian lay people.
Okay.
So if throughout the trial, he's being chummy, fraternizing. At one point, he was actually singing to the defendant. I don't know if you all saw this. He was singing to the defendant, and then the defense attorney started dancing and moving around and started dancing to the judge's sing. Now, at first I was like, this is unbelievable. And then I remembered I've been in court and me and the judge have done worse and more goofy things than that, but not during a murder. Not during a murder.
Right. And that was a difference that the judge may have shown you. Did they show your client the same? And so what you're saying in this instance, it was shown toward the client.
Yes, I've never seen that. Now, there's one time when I was in front of a judge. This happened to be an African-American judge, and my defendant was a unicorn. In the criminal justice system, my defendant, my client, was a unicorn. He was a young black male. He was getting a GPA of 3.98, studying mechanical engineering. Okay, you do not see somebody charged. He was charged for possession of marijuana, and this was back when marijuana was still considered like, ooh, scary drug. You know, now marijuana is like cigarettes now, but this was in the mid 2000s when marijuana was still scary. And the black judge who I was in front of, it was a plea deal, and he was negotiating where he was going to preserve this young man so he could continue making good grades. So he didn't put him in jail, he didn't convict him, but we worked out something.
But was there a juror? Was there a jury involved?
No, there wasn't a jury.
There was no jury. Okay.
But just to give you an idea of how security works in the courtroom, this guy was a college student, 3.98 GPA in mechanical engineering. I don't even have to show you a picture of him to show you that this guy is the farthest thing from being a thug. He is no threat.
Right.
The judge wanted him to approach so he finished giving him that judicial lecture, but he wanted to approach and talk to him personally. So the judge had to stop everything, look over to the sheriff's officers and say, Now, sheriffs, I would like for this young man to come forward. I want to talk to him. You all don't have to take any action. And he spent like maybe 10 seconds telling them to stand down, basically, and go
Because
away
of the
from
protocol. Right.
Yeah, go
And
away from
because of the need to
protocol
protect.
and let him
Right.
come forward with his attorney.
Mhm.
And sure enough, they did. We came forward. We walked very slowly and reverently up there, and he started talking to him. And he actually started talking to him like he was his uncle and his father. He started talking to him about his personal life. And my client had a bad acne, so he said, "What are you doing about that acne? I want you to clear that up." Boom, boom, boom. But just to do that for somebody who's in front of the court for something that's nonviolent,
Mhm.
something that's a leafy green natural substance that's now being sold by soccer moms on TV in reality shows. He had to do all of that to get him to come up to the bench. Kyle Rittenhouse, who murdered 2 people and almost killed a third, was able to go up and behind the bench.
Right.
And
Right.
nobody's allowed to go on and up and behind the bench. That's a
Right.
sacred area.
Right.
So I'm like, what is going on in this trial? And all I could say is this just white on white fraternity, fraternizing.
One of the things that I concur with you, Attorney McKenzie, is that have you seen, as a law enforcement officer, I saw defendants come in and out of court all the time.
Mhm.
As an attorney, same thing. And those charged with the most violent crimes are handcuffed, shackled, belly chained, have the orange jumpsuit. I understand
Okay.
why Mr. Rittenhouse had, his suit on, because you don't want to give off that
Appear.
aura of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
To the jury.
But there are other concealed mechanisms that they have for defendants, such as shock waist chains, that if the defendant gets out of order, he's shocked or whatever. Rittenhouse had none of that
Nothing.
on.
Okay.
And he was just allowed to roam, and he had those little boyish looks. I was actually taken aback by the fact, like Attorney McKenzie just referred to, with the judge saying you can't refer to them as victims. Okay, but to every coin, there's 2 sides to it.
Right.
How are you not going to let them refer to them as victims, the people who were
Right.
shot,
Right.
but then in the next breath say, you know what? You can refer to them as rioters, looters,
Right.
arsonists.
Right.
Get that.
Right.
And
Right.
and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there was that much rioting and looting and violence.
Right.
Mm-mm.
So
It was unrest, but hey, I mean,
but that's what a protest is for.
Right.
Like the
and
Boston
so-
Tea Party. Unrest.
Exactly.
Hello, that's what this country is based on. When something is unjust, we Boston Tea Party it up.
Right.
And that was a violent,
Yeah.
protest.
Well, it ended as such. Attorney Roseberry, I think you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to say, even with the even in the juvenile court system, the delinquency system, the juveniles come in the courtroom, and they are shackled. Like they're not just if they're detained, if they've been detained, they come in there in the courtroom shackled. The bailiffs are right behind them. The officers are right there, and they're not getting anywhere near the judge. They better sit down, and they better stay right there because the bailiff is standing right beside them.
Right.
It just blew my mind.
Right.
There's something else that I read as well, that and with regard to the judge's behavior, which was that at some point the judge's cell phone rang during
Yes.
during the trial, and I guess his ringtone was I guess one of the songs that they used for the rally, the January 6th rally.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just like another example of this judge's behavior. I read that he was appointed in 1983, and he's won 37 re-elections. since that time. Yeah.
Okay.
He's, I believe he's 75 years old. So he's probably not going anywhere until he retires.
So in those instances, though, I mean, can the prosecutors, have something to say in terms of how he is presented, or would they be able to object to some of that behavior, or at that point it's just too late?
That they can object. You can
Okay.
object to anything, so
Okay.
long as you have a reason for your objection.
Okay.
But the thing is
Or you
the
can
way
object
this
and make
judge.
up your objection later on while you're saying objection. You can object and
I
figure out what the
object to
real
that
objection
objection.
is.
Right.
But the thing is the judge, the way he treated the prosecution
Mm-hmm.
in open court. I
Right.
have never ever seen that in open court. If sometimes lawyers get rung a new one from the bench, I get that, but the most serious, most egregious instances are saved for the judge's chambers. And
Mm-hmm.
this judge, outside of the presence of the jury, which was good and proper, but he went above and beyond and just ripped the prosecution a new one. And that was,
children.
I was taken aback.
Yeah. He spoke down to them as if he was a child.
Mhm.
Wow.
It was like, what is going on here?
He talked about, his expressions on his face.
Mm.
And I don't get that. I'm the type of person personally that I can control my mouth, but my facial expressions, I try, but I don't succeed on sometimes. You can pretty
Right.
much know what I'm thinking just by looking at me. But there's no crime in thinking or feeling a certain way about a judge's ruling that you don't necessarily agree with. So
Right.
long as you don't say anything,
Mhm.
how are you going to admonish him for the look on his face?
Mhm.
I think that community is a community of very different people. And you know more of this better than I do, Attorney Red Cross. I remember when he first got arrested, when the police chief came out to give his first
Press conference.
conference, I
Mhm.
wanted to jump through my TV and strangle his ass. Excuse my language. This guy was being questioned about the actions of Mr. Rittenhouse, and instead of saying we have a situation where we have an underage person who had a gun, who came from out of town, who is being charged with murder for two people, or is being detained, or whatever. Just you know how the basic press conferences. They try not to be overly prejudicial in one way or the other.
Right.
And they'll just say the investigation is ongoing, or we're not going to answer any more questions because it's still under investigation. But
Mhm.
the community can be safe that we have found the perpetrator and he's in custody. Thank
Right.
you. I'll hand it over to Captain So and So. Something like that.
Mhm. Mhm.
This guy went in there, and the police chief started started defending.
Defending.
The Rittenhouse.
By the way, this judge should get an award for being the greatest defense attorney forever. He basically said, "I'm going to be a defense attorney," but the police chief turned into a defense attorney too. He says, "What we have here is a young man who came upon a situation and felt that he had to resolve a situation in the best way that he could, and he basically started."
Right. So this defense started early.
Explaining away the crime that's involved and basically protected him. Just like that other police officer in Atlanta. He says, well, yes, he went around
He had a
shooting.
bad day. He was having
a bad day.
Right. Right.
Oh my
There was actually a police, it was a sheriff in Florida, and it was one of those stand your ground kind of deals. I believe, a black male was shot by a white male at a gas station for parking in the handicapped parking spot. They weren't at the police level. They were not going to prosecute They were done with it. He got in a press conference and he told everyone in the press conference, you know, the defendant or, you know, the guy who shot, he used the stand your ground law. And as far as we can tell, he's within his rights. It's not for the police to make that.
Absolutely. Right. That's for the state's attorney or the district attorney to do that. Right. What's going on?
There's a lot of ways we go around getting a case in front of a jury. You can do a probable cause arrest. You can get a warrant. You can get a grand jury indictment. Doesn't matter. But for the police at that level, we are not, as a former police officer, we're not the deciders.
That's not their call. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, and with all of this being said, is there a lesson to be learned for the community when it comes to this? Or is it just the white privilege situation? And I mean, are there any ways to get around this?
I want to add. I want to expound on that.
Okay.
As I was researching for this dialogue, something came to me, and it was when the person is a white defendant, when the defendant is white, they walk into that courtroom innocent until proven guilty.
Okay.
When the black defendant walks in the court, it's just the opposite. They're guilty until proven innocent. Now, you can't find that anywhere in any law books. That's just a doctrine that, you know, we go by. Okay,
it's no problem. Right. We've seen it.
It's effective. Right. It's effective. It hurts us. It harms us. And you add that with this judge and how he acted, and that sheriff's, that officer, Attorney McKenzie was talking about, you know, taking the defendant's word for word, and these are the facts, and that's just it. That goes to my point. We are guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that the thing I walked away from is Wisconsin said loud and clear, yes, you can. Yes, you can come into our state and kill people. And guess what? Somebody did that last night.
What?
Yes.
Karma.
Yes.
But they made it loud and clear. You can come in and you can create chaos. And if you want to escape from that chaos that you created it, kill. And we're good with it. The judge said we're good with it. The police chief said we're good with it. And 12 citizens said we're good with it.
Right.
So
if you will know, go ahead. And do you guys know anything about the breakdown of the jury? Like what did they consist of? Males, women? Did they have any
I don't know.
They have not shared that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know in Ahmaud Arbery's case, which is totally different, but in that case, the breakdown is 11 white and 1 person of color.
Wow.
And even in that case, the judge suspected that they were excluded. Prospective jurors were excluded due to their race, but there wasn't anything he could do about it.
Okay.
Now, you know, I don't have a problem with that as a defense attorney.
In terms of the race of the racial breakdown.
Jury of your peers. I got 3 white defendants on trial. I want my jury to be white. I don't want a 9-3 or 10-2 or 11-1 of blacks. Same thing. We don't, but the law, the Batson case is the one that established that so many blacks for so many years were being judged by all white jurors who were being so racist. That law was established for us. But of course, under the 14th Amendment, once you establish a constitutional law or Supreme Court law, the Equal Protection Clause says it's got to go for everybody. But I just want to know, I just want that if my client gets charged with a murder in that same county where those 3 rednecks are being charged, I want my black defendant to get a good percentage of blacks on his jury. I don't want no 11-1 all white.
Right. So you would want to flip it. Prosecutors will strike black jurors when they have a black defendant on trial regularly and routinely. But they don't do the same for whites.
Oh no.
Right.
No.
because we're
And
automatically presumed that we're going to be in favor of our own. And, we were excluded for so many years. During Reconstruction, we made a comeback. After the Civil War, blacks made a
Right.
comeback. I mean,
Right.
we were jurors, we were lawyers, we were judges, councilmen, etc. And then, due to Southern threats and hostility and lynchings, and then they created laws to disenfranchise us. Then we couldn't serve on those juries anymore. So it's like they never have wanted us on the jury. They still don't want us on the jury, and that's why I tell every black person that will hear my voice is don't play the jury game when you get the jury notice. We have to have you on those
Exercise your
juries.
right.
That is a game that they can play. They can play because there's so many more of them than there are of us.
Okay.
But when you exclude yourself, your vote on that jury makes the difference. It can make or break a case. Believe it or not, it will make or break that case. So we wonder, as blacks, why our black men and women are going to prison for
at a higher rate,
petty, or not going away for the same amount of time. That's because none of us were on the jury.
Right. I think that is a strong takeaway, Attorney Redcross. Like, in terms of what we can do differently, is we can accept those notices and show up to be represented on juries going forward, so that we can have the opportunity to listen to both sides and to be able to be a participant in that process where it counts.
Exactly.
So that's a great takeaway.
Yeah, I agree.
do you think? I'm sorry.
You were going to say?
Ivana, were you going to say something?
No, I was just going to say I looked up the jury. It looks like there were 7 women and 5 men, and I believe 1 of color, just for the Rittenhouse jury.
Okay. I was going to say that I think a lot of black people shy away from sitting and doing jury duties because that means they have to take away from work.
Correct.
And you get a little bit of allowance, but a lot of employers will not pay you your regular.
Right.
They have to let you go and sit,
Right.
but they're not going to pay you for those days. And some of these trials take weeks,
Months.
2 weeks. A lot of these trials just take a day or 2, 3 days.
Okay.
But your big murder ones can take 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and if it's in federal court, forget about it.
Yeah.
So there are so many areas where particularly black men, are needed, but because we're, if you're not locked up, or if you're not part of the criminal justice system, because those 2 things disqualify you, the ones that are hardworking, you miss out. Like, for instance, our community would be so much better served if, and when I say this, you're gonna get a visual, and it's gonna look so weird, but then you're gonna be like, but that's a huge solution. If we could get grown, strong black men teaching, starting from preschool, kindergarten, 1st grade, flood these inner city schools with black males. You know how much of a difference that would make with these young little knucklehead boys who are growing up with their single moms, and they're so out of control. Just coming to school every day, year after year, and seeing not one but several black men teaching them. That would make a huge difference. But if you talk to them, they'll be like, yeah, but I went to school. My parents were poor. I went to school. I got loans. I didn't go all this way. I'm trying to get married. I got kids for $36,000. I can't do that.
Right. So, Devonna, you sound like you wanted to say something. Did you want to add something?
No, I mean, I'm just thinking about what Attorney McKenzie said, and that's definitely true. It's definitely needed. I think it would make a world of difference. But that's a whole nother issue as it relates to
Yeah,
the teacher
yeah.
salary.
I
It's
went off.
just
I went off. I went
no,
off.
it's
I'm so
fine.
Well,
sorry.
we're
No, it's fine.
solutioning.
It's
We're
a
trying to
very good.
solution some things.
Right,
So
it's a very,
Did you say
very good point.
solutioning?
we're solutioning things. Yes.
She's making up words.
Making up words. We got to find a solution to these things for sure. We need it. We definitely need it. We definitely need it.
Yeah, we
So
do.
going back to the Rittenhouse case, is there anything additional that you guys want to add in terms of your observations?
It just is disheartening.
Hmm.
And some of the this is a rally that was dominated by, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it was dominated by white people. And I don't know if you've noticed, especially after George Floyd, a lot of these Black Lives Matter rallies have been dominated by white people. White people are angry. They are
Right.
sick and tired of themselves. And to see two white people and two white deceased people and one injured white person being
Not
killed
get justice. Right.
for marching for Black Lives Matter, which is
Right.
detested. And let's go back to why they were marching. They were marching because of Blake,
Right.
who is viewed as,
A
in the
criminal.
lens of white supremacists, as just the type of guy that, yes, we want to kill. He
Right.
should have died. He didn't listen. He didn't obey. He didn't comply. Maybe if he had complied, now all you liberals are out here marching because somebody didn't comply, creating this false narrative.
Right.
And I wonder, I'm curious as to how this, because now this is not a Black victim. This is not Ahmaud Arbery. This is not Trayvon Martin. This is not this is not Breonna Taylor. This is Rosenbaum, was the last name.
Right.
Of them.
Right.
This
Right.
is, and two other white people. I'm
Right.
wondering how this is going to play out.
Right.
Because now the racial makeup is kind of twisted.
Right.
You know?
And I think,
Well,
go ahead.
it was kind of conflated, the situation. You're absolutely correct when you say that this began because Jacob Blake was shot. Jacob Blake being a Black male shot by a white police officer. Then we had demonstrations. I'm just afraid. Well, we were forced to look at it through a racial lens,
Right.
being that, that racial, no Black person was shot or killed in that. It was just a BLM protest.
Correct.
And then all of a sudden BLM is, demonized, and then people are, even who are not regularly following this case, are thinking that the victims were Black when in fact they were not.
Right.
And then you have, at the very same time, in Georgia, you have the Ahmaud Arbery case going. And that was a Black victim.
Right.
And I'm afraid that what people are going to do is take that outcome from Kenosha and bring it down to Georgia. And if they don't get the outcome that they want in Georgia, that things are just going to blow out of control. See, it didn't work in Kenosha, and now it's not working here, and our justice system just doesn't work. So we're going to take matters into our own hands, and people will be hurt.
Yeah.
I don't want that to happen, but it's a possibility.
Right.
One thing that we can still hold on to, and I hope that this administration does it, because if the administration was reversed and Trump was in, he certainly would do it. Kyle Rittenhouse can still be charged federally with gun laws, transporting. Okay, so they said he didn't bring the gun into Wisconsin, but I believe he took it and brought it back over into Illinois.
Right.
So he can be charged with interstate crimes and gun charges. And I know if he was a police officer and he overstepped his law enforcement authority and killed somebody, he could be Chauvin. Derek Chauvin is going to be charged in federal court for violating George Floyd's civil rights. Now, I don't do a lot of civil stuff, so Attorney Red Cross and Roseberry, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if a private citizen can be sued for violating somebody else's civil rights. I don't know, because I don't do that kind of work. But it's always a government entity or somebody connected to the government with authority who's usually charged with those charges. I don't know.
I believe that a private citizen can be charged with that. I believe.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% sure on that. But the one thing I was thinking about was whether or not, and you know, I'm hoping and thinking that this will be the case, that he will at least be taken to court, to civil court, for just like OJ was.
Wrongful death. Under a wrongful death theory. And it needs to be done in Illinois, because Wisconsin, we've seen how those people are off.
Right.
And I believe the cap in Illinois is 300,000. I mean, in Wisconsin it's 300,000, but in Illinois it's millions. And because he lives, you can sue somebody in the county and in the state in which they live. So Illinois has a higher threshold of what you can sue for wrongful death damages. And if he gets a judgment against him for all three, he will never be able to have a work. He will get a job, and he'll be like paying child support for the rest of his life. Garnished. Right. And I hope that happens.
I do too. I really hope that happens as well.
Yeah.
So, is there anything people can do to bring about judicial change?
Well, I think Attorney Jeffrey Red Cross said one of the most powerful things, and that's African Americans participating. And then I can't, because I'm too silly, but people like Attorney Red Cross, Rosenberry, and myself, I would not qualify, becoming judges so that a black man could judge Kyle Rittenhouse instead of some old crusty, ashy white guy losing his hair. But that's two things. Following Attorney Red Cross's lead, getting more of us in to sit for jury duty, and more having more black police officers. So a black police chief can come out with some sense and say, well, we're going to investigate him. We can't make too many comments now because the state's
for them to do their job and to act in a professional manner that is required for the job, which is what has not necessarily transpired in these instances.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, when you look at the whole dynamic of things, speaking, for example, law enforcement, white supremacy has infiltrated law enforcement.
Yes.
It is. I'm not going to say that it hasn't.
At the riot, at the insurrection.
It's infiltrated my department. It could have. I don't know. Or my former department, but it has. So my point is, if white supremacy has infiltrated police departments, then why is Black Americans, why are we so reluctant to get into the business? We are the check and the balance for white supremacy in that organization. You know, if you say, you know, I don't want to be no snitch, I don't want to be a cop. Well, that's a license to give those white supremacists who have been told, hey, if you want to kill somebody black, just join the police department.
Yep.
That gives them a license to do what they do and say what they say. We need to become more active.
Right. No, we can't stand on the sidelines.
My understanding, I don't know for sure because I'm not a black police officer, but my understanding is that when you're a black police officer, it's a lonely life, because when you're on the force, the whites are like, there's still racism. That's why y'all have to have that black fraternal order of police. But then the black community, when you take your uniform off, or you may still have your uniform still on, and when you come back to the black community, they're sucking their teeth at you. They're like, why'd you join an organization that has done nothing but kill us left and right and still continue to kill us? And we know that when you join the police force, you can only do so much.
Right.
So, and I don't know if you've experienced this, Attorney Red Cross, but it's like you got a lot of white people who are like, you know, like I've heard that white police officers are very, very mean and racist to fellow black police officers. And I've talked because I do criminal defense, I have to talk to black police officers and white all the time. And I've talked to a lot of black police officers saying that sometimes when I'm not in my uniform and I'm riding around with my family, I get pulled out the car and treated like I'm a thug. And I'm like, yeah. So you guys must have the highest stress and the highest rejection from America ever, you know?
Have you all ever noticed that when it's a situation with the racial component, how the white officers in command speak on behalf of police, on behalf of the organization? But then, you know, you have black leaders who speak on behalf of, you know, the citizenry. And we're caught in the middle.
Right.
We can't say anything. We as black officers don't have a platform. You know, I've never, of all the racial things that I went through, situations in America that I went through in my 26 years of law enforcement, I never once was asked to speak to anybody about any matters relating to racial unrest because they already had the answers. They already had who they wanted to, you know, address the situation.
Represent.
And
right.
there's nothing wrong with that, but it gives off the notion that, you know, black officers
are complacent,
are buying into that. And I totally disagreed with some of the positions that the police took, but I didn't have a platform to come out and say, you know, I don't agree with this. We should have done it a different way. And then when you do it, you face discipline. So that's why you don't see a lot of black officers coming out, speaking to the community, you know, giving it real or keeping it real, like we say in the hood. You don't have that.
Right. And before we move further, Lori Nelson added that folks need to research the judges in their jurisdiction and vote appropriately. The Rittenhouse judge ran unopposed the last 3 cycles.
I totally agree with that.
I hope that changes. I hope they get a up and coming female, Latino, black, somebody who's not a white male to go up against him and remove his ancient biased self. Somebody said it 100% right. One girl said, what I can't understand about this entire trial is how that judge was able to put his black robe, how to fit over his white robe. I said, okay.
Right.
So thinking, yes, how did he do that?
Right. And I didn't want to take off what you were saying, Jeff, because the duality of the role of trying to make a difference from the inside out, as well as how you're perceived from the outside in, you know, does become a challenge when you're basically facing that uphill climb toward the justice and toward the support. Like, you're there to support the community, but the community hasn't typically received the support from law enforcement. So you've got that antagonistic kind of approach in dealing with that as well. So I didn't want to move off of your point and not respond to it, because it is a problem. And like we're saying in all of these instances, is that the way we change it is by changing it from the inside out, and having more people join law enforcement, having more people become attorneys, having more people become judges, having more people vote in those districts where there are, when there are judges that need to be voted for. We have to be able to exercise our right, not get so upset and discouraged by the things that have happened, and really focus on what we need to do to make change.
And to your point, really quick, I mean, I remember Michelle Obama coming out and asking the Black community to vote.
Yes.
That your vote really matters. And she said, I want you to vote like you've never voted before.
Right.
And so we can send a resounding message that, Joe Biden is the winner. And what do? We came out in droves, even though
Yes.
some people in certain states they tried to disenfranchise them by various ways. But they went to the polls, their vote mattered. And now what did they do? We came out and showed out so much that they said fraud, but they can't prove it. But they said
Right.
fraud. And so you're sitting back and you're like, how does my vote really matter? Absolutely, your vote matters. Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, that was
Devonna, you were
proof.
going to say something?
That I'm just saying that election was certainly proof, and I think that Lori Nelson hit the nail on the head. Like researching, like that judge should not be on the bench again. Like if this really angers us and really upsets us, the people in that state and that county need to vote him out. That's how if you shop at a store and they accuse you of shoplifting or they follow you around as we get followed around sometimes, you say I'm not going back to that store.
That's right.
And so along the same vein, if we have a judge who is behaving in this manner, we got to fire him.
Right.
Plain and simple. But that only happens if people pay attention and if people vote. That's the only way.
I'm hoping that the Attorney Grievance Commission in the state of Wisconsin brings him before the commission to admonish him in some kind of way.
Right.
But if Wisconsin if they're all alike and all the same, nothing's going to happen,
Yeah.
Well, and you're looking at the numbers in terms of what that county looks like in terms of blacks versus whites and the other racial breakdowns, right? To really be able to affect that change. But the point is like we've got to do our part. If there's only three of us, the three of us need to vote and make sure that we do our part. Because we can't keep complaining about stuff we're not doing anything about. It's not going to bring about the change that we need.
Sure.
And it's not just voting, it's serving as well.
Yes.
Right.
Traditionally, we always say voting, and there's nothing wrong with that because people have lost their lives because they didn't have the right to vote.
Absolutely.
But these same people have also lost their lives because they weren't allowed to serve on juries.
Correct. Okay, so when you're saying serving, you're talking about the jury serving. So we're talking about voting. We're talking about serving on the jury. We're talking about a life of service, right? From law enforcement, from judges and things of that nature, to really make a change from the inside out.
Well, the reason why the civil rights movement was so powerful and so successful is because people weren't necessarily thinking about themselves.
Correct.
It's not my problem. It's not my problem. Right. That's the mentality we have now. Then it was like, yep, I know I'm about to go over this bridge and I know I'm about to get hurt, maybe even killed, but the cause is worth it, And we need to get back to that, collectively doing what we need to do to get people like this Judge Schroeder out of office.
Absolutely.
No matter what.
Yeah.
How do we handle this? I've not seen any evidence of it, but I don't think we need to be rocket scientists to predict this. But how do we handle the up and coming new emboldened and empowered feeling from white supremacists now? Yeah, I can arm myself and I can start going to jurisdictions where BLM is there and I can strap on my open carry, whatever. And if anybody messes with me, I can shoot him. Why wouldn't they have that attitude now? And now Kyle Rittenhouse is a hero. And there could be some unstable, really right on the fence of somebody just, all they need is a little push into cray-cray world and be like, well, I'm going to do the same thing. That's what I'm concerned about.
And that's a real concern, right? That's a very real concern because even with regard to this verdict, I mean, how does this affect future situations similar to this? When you're looking at, will this be stated as, as precedents for going forward?
At least in Wisconsin, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And I almost want to advise all black people, like if you're a black person and you live in Wisconsin, move. Go to
Mm-hmm.
areas where our numbers are greater. You could not have that foolishness here in Maryland. In
Mm-hmm.
Maryland, the gun laws are way more conservative, and you couldn't have the display of foolery that you had in Wisconsin. And I don't know if you've all been observing, but now, Attorney Roseberry, you're down there in the state of Georgia. We folks up here in North are looking at this Arbery trial, and we're like,
Yes.
that lawyer just get up in court as a member
Mm-hmm.
of
Yes,
the
he
bar
did.
and say, we don't
Yes,
need
he
any
did.
more black pastors coming in here. Did that actually
Yes, he
happen?
did.
That would
That happened.
That
never
was
happen
actually
in.
said.
If I was in that courtroom and I was in the well practicing, I'd have been like, oh no, objection. And me and that lawyer would be going at it. I remember one
Well,
time
I
a
don't
judge
think that that would
turned me
happen
down.
all over Georgia. Certainly in the metro area, I don't think that would happen. But yes, that's on the outskirts, and so it happened.
Well,
See,
he's
black
playing a
people don't need to be living in those areas.
That
No,
attorney
they
is playing a dangerous game because he is trying to create an appealable issue. He's trying to bait Reverend Jackson, who wasn't the first time that he mentioned his name, wasn't even in the courtroom.
Right.
don't.
He brought his name up specifically. And then what did Reverend Jackson do? He came subsequently. But he's trying to sit there and make the issue when it's not even an issue. And he's trying to make the appellate court look at it like a mob assembled outside and inside the courtroom. Therefore, my client did not get a fair trial.
If he
Right.
was
He's trying
smart,
to create it. And the judge, thank God, saw through it.
if he was smart, if he wanted to create an appealable issue, he would have said, Your Honor, there are too many public figures who have great influence and could potentially prejudice the jury and have an abnormal influence on the jury because of their notoriety. He didn't even establish it. He just said, there's so many black pastors. We got to get rid of these black pastors.
Wow.
Well, one, I want to say if all lives matter, why didn't you say all pastors? But when you say black pastors, I mean, you didn't even specify or give qualifiers. You just said we're having too many black pastors. There's no appellate
That's what I was about to say.
panel
Try to
of judges that will be like,
Right. Yeah, that's not an appeal.
we can't discriminate based on race. You just asked the judge to engage in a 1950s style racial profiling and exclusion. Idiot. Maybe if you would have made the argument that notoriety or something like that.
Right.
But let's not forget, when Medgar Evers was when the murder of Medgar Evers was on trial, who came down to watch his trial? The governor, not black pastors. The governor came and he went up to the defendant and shook his hand.
Yeah.
So this little funniness with the judge and the defendant is nothing new.
Right.
His narrative is that the mob outside is influencing the jury. We all know that there is no mob outside, but he's saying with Reverend Jackson coming from outside, inside, going back outside, that's like a mob-like atmosphere, trying to compare that atmosphere to the 1960s and 50s when the defendant was black and all the spectators were white.
Right.
Because they were threatening violence. The only thing we're threatening is peace.
Correct. Exactly.
But through a religious man.
And didn't they try that with the Chauvin case?
Pray. Oh, come on, let's pray. Let's pray for justice. That's all he's going to do.
Right. But didn't they try that with the Chauvin situation? Like they tried to say that there was influence on the outside.
Oh, with Maxine Waters. Maxine
work.
Waters had said something and they tried to use that as a mistrial because the jury could be influenced by her. The judge, see, this is why we need black judges. The judge in that case was like, I'm not buying that argument. However, I wish Maxine Waters, and then he went on a big rant against Maxine Waters. I'm like, you need to shut your mouth and be the judge, be fair and impartial and preside over this case. Stop getting into Maxine Waters. The judge in this Arbery case, I wish he would have, I know in Maryland, the judge would have said, counsel, approach.
Right.
Don't you use that language in my courtroom again, talking about black pastors and that. But because he's white, he doesn't, I don't know if he understands how offensive and how disgusting that was.
Yes.
And a black judge would have been like, first of all, he would not have stood up in front of the black judge and said, we need to get rid of these black pastors. Because the black judge would have been like, want to get rid of me too?
Right. Why are you getting rid of folks?
Right. You know, but that white judge should have been a little bit more like, you're coming this close. Counsel, you need to be mindful that this is a court of law and that there's certain civil rights laws that have passed. You're being very close to finding yourself in contempt. That's what I would have told him. But he's like, well, no, you know, motion denied. Come on, man.
Right. It's time to make the statements.
Yeah.
Well, I know that we're coming up on the last 2 minutes for our hour today and our hour conversation. The Ahmaud Arbery situation is coming up. They are deliberating on that, or at least they're having those closing arguments.
Yeah.
Yes, they're having those closing arguments. So I'm sure we're going to be here again. But as it relates to, you all's final words in terms of the Rittenhouse, I want to do a round robin on those. And so we'll start with you, Attorney Roseberry.
Yeah, I guess my final thought, it just comes from a meme that's kind of going around on social media that just really sticks out as it relates to a comparison between Kyle Rittenhouse and Trayvon Martin, both of whom were 17 years old. It says that Rittenhouse carried an assault rifle. Trayvon Martin carried a bag of Skittles. Rittenhouse kills two, injures one person. Trayvon Martin was walking in a hoodie. Trayvon Martin was killed by a not guilty vigilante, not guilty in air quotes. And that Kyle Rittenhouse is a quote unquote not guilty vigilante. So that just really sticks out to me. Just the injustice, just the unfairness. It just, as a mother of two black sons, a wife, and a brother, and it's just heartbreaking that we find ourselves once again in a situation where there's no justice, and it seems to be all due to white privilege. And so that's just kind of where I'll leave it.
Okay, thank you. Attorney Red Cross.
The only limitations that we have to our success is ourselves. When somebody comes up to you and tells you, young person, middle-aged person, old person, if anyone comes up to you and tells you that you can't do this, you can't be here, take that as a personal challenge, because in actuality, you can do anything that you set your mind to. Secondly, we need to get involved in our communities.
Absolutely.
Apathy is the same thing as doing the wrong thing. We need to get involved, get on these juries, whatever you have to do, whatever. I know you may miss a few dollars, but, I'm sorry, but somebody's life hangs in the balance.
Yeah.
So get involved, serve on the juries, and make a difference.
Thank you. Attorney McKenzie.
I just want to piggyback off of Attorney Red Cross's comments. I would like for us to get to where the goal that he just set. But I think one thing we need to do is act like we feel like we are full participants in the American process. We feel for so long we were forced to feel like you are just a peripheral outsider looking in, and what we decide you just go along with. We have to start thinking like, I have every right to be here at this table
Yes, sir.
from from the nutrition that exudes from the Constitution. I have every right to be here. I'm equal as you, and I'm going to participate. We have to get that mentality.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
The last thing I want to just say is the one thing arising out of all of this started with George Floyd, and it's even continuing with this one. I'm seeing it on social media. The anger and outrage of white people is that of a level that I've never seen before. And unfortunately, no matter how much we participate, blacks cannot change the system by ourselves.
Right.
The amount of anger that I'm seeing from white people, things look optimistic that their change is coming.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you all for your time tonight. And for those who have watched, I encourage you to share this as well as to stand by. We are here. The justice team for the Healthy Heart Nation will be here to have these conversations so that we can drive change as we move forward and as we move on. So do your part, register to vote, serve on your juries. And do not be discouraged in terms of your ability to make a difference. Continue to work hard, not just for yourselves, for your family, but for future generations. We have to change it now or we won't be changing it at all. So thank you all for your time and have a good evening.
Have a good evening.